Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of the Leadership Untitled podcast, the show that brings an expert in the world of leadership and/or L&D and gets them to share their advice, their insights, and also the traps that they've fallen into in the past, so you guys hopefully don't fall into the same ones and you're able to build a much nicer place to work in the process. My guest this week is Chris Williams. Now, Chris has been the Leadership Development Manager now at Huddersfield University for around 2.5 years, having been a key cog previously in the leadership development team at Sky for over 6 years before that. I actually attended his programme at Sky as a first-time leader myself, and I'm glad I did. I think it's safe to say that Chris isn't a trainer's guide kind of guy, nor is he into pointless dancing energisers that fill time and make the most people feel incredibly uncomfortable. Why do we still do that, by the way? What Chris is, however, is a leadership expert with a strong sense of responsibility to and for the leaders under his watch, maximising the impact of his time with them and following that up with targeted coaching conversations that never feel targeted and rarely feel like coaching. So let's hear more about him, his influences and his thoughts as I welcome Chris to the show. Hey Chris, welcome to the Leadership Untitled podcast. How are you, mate?
Hello Rob, how are you?
How are you? Got to do the pleasantries. We've been talking for half an hour before this. We have just been
yeah, absolutely. I have to confess, I mean, I know you'll be recording the proper intro in post, but if you're using the script that you showed me, then I've got a bit of imposter syndrome because I'm not sure I'm wholly comfortable with that leadership expert title.
But really? Why is that? Considering that I've seen your level of expertise and probably sole commitment to expertise over the last 10 years or so.
Well, because I only actually know like 3 things. I've just found 100 different ways of saying it, and it looks clever.
Well, joking aside, though, I think, you kind of look at it and you go, how many books I wouldn't even like to consider now on Amazon, how many books might come up if you type leadership.
Yeah.
And it's become difficult because it is so many different polarizing views on it. So keeping it simple is probably a good thing, isn't it?
Well, I suppose so, yeah. But, you've had like David James and, Mr. Cheese on here. You've had cricketers, famous cricketers. And then you got me, just this like, long-haired hippie who's bringing the lockdown hair fashion, bit of lockdown hair fashion to the podcast, I suppose.
Well, it's all about inclusion. We have to bring you on, the voice of the common man.
Yeah, I'll be that. Yeah, that's fine. I could represent that demographic.
What's your? You mentioned your 1 or 2 messages then that you spread around. What are those? Like I really need to know, but my audience would love to know. I don't know. I don't think is it in there. Yeah, it is in the intro because we go way back, and I think people will detect that as they watch this conversation unfold or listen to this conversation unfold. But just very simply, many years ago, I just came to this realization that there was so much kind of fluffing everything up and padding everything out, and just this weird kind of language of procrastination and distance from everything we do. So I just decided, right, I'm just going to teach people to ask questions. Just ask questions, just work with questions. And the kind of moving myself away from, this is about L&D and leadership, the theme of your podcast, moving myself away from being the showman at the center of the experience and just encouraging people to be accountable for themselves, not only for their performance, but in terms of their learning behavior, and then everything else was just geared towards just attacking those 2 ideas from as many different angles as I could through as much exposure as I had with my, I know you don't like labels, with my delegates. Your delegates, yes, your learners.
Yeah. So if going back through, I mean, you've been on programs that I've run before,
yeah,
and there are people out there right now who are on programs I'm running that really just be more self-aware, reflect, and the best way to do that is to ask questions.
Yeah, I've touched on it, I think, in the intro. So yeah, it was where we know each other from was Sky. So I was at Sky for about 7.5 years, not dissimilar, just about 7 years as well, weren't you? I think just till a little bit after me.
Yeah.
And it was actually I was my first time in terms of actual people management, line management responsibilities was the first job I had at Sky. First time I had a job doing that rather, and I came on the leadership development program. which ironically I'd first been told I couldn't before that because I wasn't a leader. But that aside, then when I was one, I could, after a few months of stress and wondering what the hell I should be doing and why I was so stressed I wanted a week off ill, they put me onto it, and I obviously came on it with you, and those influences still stick with me. And I always say I don't want to build your ego up any more than it already is. You won't get through that door.
I do have an enormous ego, yes.
But I think it was the things you said. It's the simplicity of it, and the number of like the theory messages were limited, but surrounded by just that conversational learning. And one of the things I put in the intro was around, you go to so many pieces of training, and they'll do the old little buzz sessions at the start and the energizers, and you come back from lunch and you're all doing the can or whatever it is and remembering the dance before and making idiots of yourself. You know what? And some people have a bit of fun with that. And what people missed probably or didn't appreciate about some of the things that you did was, like, for the first 20 minutes, like we're talking to everybody as a group about what they've done over the weekend or what they were doing tonight or what they're listening to on the train to Leeds, which is where we did the program, on Spotify, or what they're watching overnight. And everyone was really engaged and interested because it was their lives. That's what they'd been doing, and they wanted to talk about it. And then everyone was energized without having to do something completely false.
Yeah.
And awkward, and me being the, as you always said, the shoot from the hip blue in terms of insights. I really didn't want to stand up and start dancing in the middle of the room. I was quite happy to do that.
No. I mean, that's not. I'm not going to deny in my time, through my own career, working in L&D, and I am, but for all intents and purposes, a very traditional trainer by trade. That's certainly how I started out in the world of L&D, and for the vast majority of my career, even at the point of that program where the kind of the perspective of what L&D should be all about was shifting in me and in the world around me. But there came a point where I threw out all the bamboo canes and all the hula hoops and juggling balls.
The bamboo cane in the corner, I remember it.
I just, because you're right, the question of intent and what an L&D individual is trying to do in terms of be engaging in order to create an engaged audience, because there's still definitely something about learning through enjoyment. That's we can't discredit the value of a pleasurable experience to help the absorption of what you're trying to help people engage with. But it was creating weird, uncomfortable moments. And so it ran deeper than just sort of ice breaking. I was seeing courses that were being developed that had these types of exercises designed to illustrate the point. And I was like, but really, are they? Because the transference of that learning from that moment of a team work exercise using a bamboo cane into the actual team working stuff that people were doing for realsies, I just wasn't seeing any evidence of that actually happening. And I know you've talked with some of your guests before about the happy sheets and all that, and I just kind of turned me back on it all and said I need to shift the paradigm of what's actually happening here. And so I threw them all out, and when I did do an exercise, it was specifically focused on what is actually going to help them for real understand how to transfer this into the workplace. I think the best example of which is where we did a lot of work around coaching talent. And we just said, well, that's not role play. Everybody hates role play. We know that. Everybody hates role play. I hate it. And I trained role play for decades. So let's just actually have coaching conversations with each other. Let's just do it.
Well, that massively influenced me because, I mean, obviously I was on that program and we spent a couple of days in Leeds and I was in the world of L&D. I think everyone else was in the world of operational leadership, across between kind of tech and sales. And the kind of two things that I found really useful about that was, one, you made it real. Like you said, it was around what real things are going on in your areas at the minute that you could talk about and get a different perspective from and bring that and have a coaching conversation about it. But secondly, it really taught me that going to people outside that immediate circle that just don't know your area, the ones that can't just go, oh, yeah, I agree with you. You're never going to get him to do that because I know him. getting away from that to an area of people that don't know any of the people that you're talking about, aren't subject matter experts in what it is that you're doing, to objectively going to go, oh, have you talked to him about that? Oh, that's interesting. Do you think he turns up to do that on purpose? Well, no one has asked me that. They've just all gone, yeah, he's like that.
Yeah. Just inquiry, ask questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just ask questions. And the vast majority of instances, I think, in that learning space, most of the time people know the answer.
Yep.
Or they have an inkling as to how to proceed. It might not be the magic answer. And so you just have to place them in a safe space where there's an opportunity to express that, and either just get some confidence from some peers who have shared experiences or similar experiences, whatever role or responsibility they have within the organization, and to ask a few questions without any judgment attached to it at all.
Yep.
Because, people know, you talk about challenging conversations, Rob. I know it's been a subject that you've considered and dwelled on for many years now. And it's like, well, we all know we have to have the challenging conversation. We all know that's. So throwing people into rooms with, conversational 4-box structures on how to have a difficult conversation, and then a role play, or showing them a video of some actors you've hired to act it out.
Yeah.
Is all fine and it's interesting, but it's not actually preparing them to have
it's
that challenging conversation.
It's the target and the connection and alignment again, isn't it? If this training is to actually make an impact in the role that you do and in the work that business is asking you to do, then that's the goal. Is this going to help you do that? Whereas so much training is very much focused on its end goal in its own right. But what do we want you to be able to do at the end of this session? Well, very little. You're going to be able to do or prove that you can do very little of this because you've not done it yet. You were learning some of the skills required to go forward. And I think this was my take on why the stuff you did at Sky was really effective, is that, yes, all right, still at that time, you were doing the classroom stuff, but it didn't start and end in the classroom. You engaged with the people that wanted to come on the courses and the accreditation. I know part of it was endorsed by the ILM, and talk to them about what the goals were, what they wanted to come from it, how they're going to be supported by their leaders, what they understood about it. Did they want the whole journey, a little bit of the journey, what was important to them? And then during that program and after it, you would actually, we sat very close in the centre as well when you weren't training. You would just be picking up things as you heard them. And you'd walk around the building and sort of see things or hear things going on, and you'd use those opportunities, like you kind of influence the leaders to do themselves, of just saying, there's an opportunity for a conversation. That's interesting. I just heard you doing that before. What do you think about that? Or whatever it might be. And I don't think many other trainers in that sort of environment do or did that. It was, my job's done, I've done the training. And, me and another trainer who shall remain nameless, I can remember very vividly walking out and marching out to the operational floor with a piece of flip chart saying, we did tell you that. We did that on week 2, day 3. How dare you say we didn't cover that in the training? We kind of go, well, that's not the point. We might well have covered it, but how on earth are they going to remember it? Or maybe it wasn't important enough to remember.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of, I suppose, bullet points around that. The first is that, if I'm not going to form a developmental relationship with someone and place myself in that impartial position where I'm encouraging this idea of asking questions and exploring their real life behavior, knowledge and skills in action being deployed to generate performance. In a bubble, I just can't do it. It may be just something about the way I'm programmed, but the follow-up is more important than whatever takes place in that classroom environment. And then they need someone in their life, they need someone in their world, any organization where it's not an echo chamber, so it's not the your peer relationships within the same department or within the same building where it just goes into descending whinge mode because you all share the same view of the rubbish situation you're caught in. But then equally, they don't need someone so far removed that they can't show some empathy and understanding as to the context that it's taking place in. So they need someone in that space. The challenge of that, of course, is that that's very difficult to measure. And one of the elements of L&D that I've often struggled with is that working so closely and sort of integrating myself so much into their world as much as possible made it very hard to measure when was learning being delivered. What was delivered, because it's being very tailored at that point then to very individual circumstances a lot of the time. Although there's obviously repeat themes that you see. People are, for as complicated and messy as human beings are, the same stuff comes up. And then what was the outcome? How did I impact that performance? Well, there's no way to measure that. There's people out there right now who will be finding themselves in a work situation in this very moment that have had a piece of learning from me or someone like me in their life, and they're going, oh yeah, what was that thing? And it's just, it just emerges and influences the way that circumstance unravels.
That measurement's crucial though, because that's the big thing that I found as kind of coming out of trend in all the places that have been that quite polarized in its view, basically, that we can measure what we do or we can't measure what we do, so we shouldn't try. But one consistent through all of that has always been, well, the only thing we think we can measure is things like the happy sheets and the pass rates and the attendees and all that sort of stuff. So we will measure that. And because that's the only thing we can really, that's the only thing we can really measure, that's what we'll target ourselves on. And therefore, if that's what we'll target ourselves on, that's what we'll measure performance against. And that's what we'll end up doing the end of year reviews on. Well, nothing to do with it. And I think it might have been David James on the episode that you talked about earlier, that he said, there's certain things like, for example, email. We don't measure it in terms of its individual impact on something. It's email. Exactly, but it's inside an organization. It's part of what we do, but we don't actually go, what's that individually contributed to it? It's part of a bigger thing. And I think, training that works to deliver good training has to try and measure how good the training was. Training and support and embedding that's trying to help someone impact their organization can only be measured by the measures of the organization.
Absolutely.
And then it's for people to decide, well, what do we think that contributed to it? Was that the Colonel's secret recipe, or was that something else? Was it the chicken? I don't know. Maybe it was all of it.
There's no magic answers to that, because how do you measure the fact that someone rephrased a sentence in a meeting that was influenced by a line of inquiry we took in a workshop together 12 months ago? Exactly. How do we measure the fact that someone redrafted an email and sent version 2 because they were thinking about an idea or a concept that was introduced to them in a coaching session? You just can't measure that. You're trying to measure the unmeasurable there. You can only, like you say, look at the broader performance. And
there's multiple layers to that as well, because you will have had certain leaders on your courses who went back to their leaders who were fully on board with what they were trying to do and encouraged them and actually supported you in coaching them and supporting them and developing them as well. You will have other leaders that probably didn't do that, and therefore the stuff that they'd learned and wanted to try and do when they got back to the floor, they couldn't, because there was just no appetite or mindset to try and do it in that way.
Absolutely. And it doesn't matter how well in that, I suppose, that group coaching sort of paradigm that I shifted my classroom stuff towards, it doesn't matter how well you explore and share as a group around how to break through a moment of procrastination or how to take grip of a decision that you need to make. It doesn't matter how well that's explored and how great or how real and substantial the ideas are, or the thoughts that it generates within the individual. It doesn't matter how many opportunities you give them to take safe shots in that safe environment. If they walk out and they still in their heart of heart themselves go, I can't do it. I'm too anxious. It's too stressful, or I just want an easy life today, or I'm tired or whatever. Then I can't take any responsibility for that.
And that's crucial. The world of responsibility and accountability of this stuff. Your responsibility lies in the things that you can control and you can contribute towards that, and therefore that's what you're accountable to. Ultimately, just like, you know, we are the school that leaders send their kids to. It's the leader needs to look after their people. That's their responsibility. And I think the other thing that's missed is these things, though they want them to be instant hits, they're not. You didn't get people coming onto your 2-day coaching workshop and then said they can coach, and now that's going to have an instant impact. And a lot of the data people, should we say, kind of look at it in that sense. Was there an immediate impact on what happened there? No. And sometimes you can actually have a downturn. So if people are now saying, to start with, they are very kind of deliberately having coaching conversations, that can take longer. Well, it will take longer. You're going to be having more conversations. It stands to reason.
Yeah.
And because of that, you're all kind of getting used to that way of working. And it might mean that people aren't making as many sales or close as many cases or whatever it might be for a while. And the sort of trick is to go, hang on a minute, let's expect that, and let's set that as an expectation, and let's build that in, because that's not the reason that this didn't work. That might just be the curve for it working.
Yes, yeah. I think Malcolm Gladwell said, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said that, you know, we expect people to reach mastery far too easily and far too quickly, and then don't really provide them with the the tools or the support network to reach that point of mastery. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, I've seen this a bazillion times, that someone is inspired by an idea in that classroom setting. The classroom setting has facilitated a good transference of that into the workplace. They go, yeah, do you know what? I am going to try that idea. Although there's something, let me circle back around to that in a minute, because there's another element to all that.
Okay.
I am going to try that idea. I'm going to give it a go. But at that point, then they just kind of rush into it in their own sphere, in their own little corner of the empire. And they put the cart before the horse a little bit, because there's all that stuff around. Yeah, I need to go and have a conversation with my line manager and say, where's my elbow room here? To what extent can I experiment and practice in this space? You will see a downturn. These are the limits, my limits of where I feel I can comfortably let performance drop in this process of change.
Yeah.
Whether it's my change of approach or encouraging a change of approach within my area of responsibility. If it goes below that, then I'll stop. Obviously, I need to readdress it. I would expect an uptick by this point. If that uptick doesn't happen, you know, we're not having those wider than conversations. So we dip we put one foot into the water and go, ooh, and then don't quite dive into the pool. Or your nerve breaks.
Yeah.
During the process of developing and trying a new skill or deploying a new approach or methodology, your nerve breaks because the pressure suddenly comes on, and you're not given the room to grow. And the sad truth is that a lot of people in leadership and management roles, learning can only take place in that classroom session because they're not given any other space in their day to learn. So they have to then learn to learn on the go. And I suppose that's where you then start talking about in the moment of need type of resource-led learning delivery.
And it comes into the layers of leadership as well, because I think one of your phrases that you said so many times that I completely hijacked is you get your team you deserve.
Oh yeah,
you get the team you deserve. And in terms of that, go on.
I've got to give credit where credit's due. I hijacked that myself.
There you go. Recycle.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But I think, it's absolutely crucial, because, what we're doing there is we're scratching the surface of certain symptoms of performance problems here in an organization, that you could do all you want in the training room, and that might be their only space where they can do it because they go back to the environment. There's no time to do that. Okay. And that is a culture set by the level of leadership above them and above them and above them. So do you think, because of that, do you think we should start it at the top, or do you think it's a case of, no, if we can push it from below and if we can start showing a different way as possible, that then influences the decisions those above, or a bit of both?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I mean, one of the frustrations that I've definitely experienced working in leadership is then those kind of layers within leadership hierarchies themselves. Yeah. And oftentimes I've seen the senior leadership or the executive leadership team almost distance themselves very much from the ideas that they're encouraging individuals in my type of position to put out onto the floor. And that actually, when it comes down to the crunch, they're not really interested in it. It's just what they think should be done. And therefore the actual true engagement with the idea doesn't exist. I don't know if I articulated that very well.
It's something I come across. If I get it right, what you're saying is that I sometimes say that leadership development is something that senior leadership want their leaders to go through. It's for them. Yeah. It's not them. It's not for them. They know all this. That's all right.
Yes. Yeah.
That's something to do to other leaders.
Yeah. And so you then go, well, here's some ideas around engagement. Here's some ideas around coaching cultures. Here's some ideas around people-focused, people-centric leadership that are modern, they're contemporary. There's evidence out there that suggests that this is a route to success and good performance. And they go, sounds great, lovely. Yeah, the guys are going to love it. And you go and then deliver that. But the moment the pressure's on, the moment underperformance enters the sphere, the moment there's a change decision made right at the top, they just go to default behavior, default settings. I've seen it especially in, I've worked with a lot of kind of entrepreneurial owner-led businesses where that often is the case, because every decision you make directly impacts everybody's wallet in that environment.
Oh yeah, if there's something heavily bonus and targeted driven about an environment, then I'm making these decisions. But ultimately, if now carrying on this course means I'm going to be even a few £100 out of pocket every month, I suddenly make a decision maybe that, well, no, that's not the case. And, Simon Sinek makes the point, doesn't he, that is one of our joint influences, that if you as a leader are responsible for the results, then you're going to probably be targeted on those results. So are you going to be leading and coaching your people in a way that takes them away from hitting their targets? Because that probably then reflects on your target.
Yeah.
You need to completely distance yourself away. And I think that, for me, I'd be interested to get your take on this, is that I think people like David James is absolutely right, of course, when it comes to around what are we doing if we're not impacting the performance of the organisation, and everything has to be connected to that with the sense of improving that. What I also think is true, and I also think David James thinks the same, is that there is also that merit sometimes to go, that away day, that training session, or that buzz session, whatever it might be, as long as the intent of that is to just give everyone a little bit of a morale boost and have some fun together and get to know each other, that's great. But let's not joke each other that that's something to do with performance. This is completely different. And I think the thread in between the two of those, and there's certain things I know that we've worked on together, that they may not necessarily have had measurable change on a performance, or as David James says, move the needle. It didn't have that big performance hit. But I also think then there's a time to review and go, in those situations, if the performance hasn't been lowered and the results haven't been impacted, is it still a better culture and a better place to work?
Not necessarily. Exactly,
but that's the evaluation to have.
Yeah. I mean, that brings me circling back around to a point I wanted to bring up. The first thing, when you talk about away days, I mean, I'm a very practical, I'm hands-on. It's frontline management is where my bread and butter sits very much. And so I've thought a lot about that kind of the sandwich effect, that, the frontline managers are the filler of the sandwich quite often. And when it comes to things like away days and training events, or you're absolutely right that they're being had because people think it's a thing that we're supposed to be having. It was in a manual somewhere that they read one time, or and then, but what they then try and do is just throw, get the bed in, get the bath in, get the whole, chuck it all in. And I'm a big believer in kind of taking an incremental approach, having real clarity about what you want to achieve by the conclusion of that type of activity.
Yeah.
And just saying, just do one thing really well.
Yeah.
Just do one thing really well. So, from a practical view, I suppose if someone's listening and they're thinking about team events, team meetings, away days, training events, learning events, all that kind of stuff, sabbaticals, whatever, then just dial it back. Just dial it back. Just follow a very simple 3-act play. This is what we're going to talk about today. Then talk about it. Then summarize what you talked about, and just do one thing and just do it really, really well. And let's just have an incremental improvement in that one space there. And then you have to ask yourself whether the 7.5 hour investment per, whatever, 10, 15 people that you're having at the event, or hundreds in the instance of an away day, is worth it or not.
Yeah,
and if it's not, sack it off and find another way. Be more creative about it. So there's that kind of element there. And then I've completely forgotten what my second point was, so I'll just find.
It'll come back.
Yeah,
this is like being back in the training room with you.
Yeah. Well, I am. That's I'm very scattershot that way.
But it was. I mean, this is there's a lot of stuff I see on social media that conversation seems to come up on LinkedIn now and again about things like the psychometric tests. And this is, and you talk about like scattergun. I know it's not the exact phrase, but you used to talk about the shoot from the hip, and I mentioned it just a little bit earlier in our conversation. Now that you just kind of took one look at me and kind of went, "You're a blue." But what I really loved about the way that you did that stuff is that it wasn't about having to go that deep inside your psyche to start understanding and questioning your whole life. The purpose of bringing that into the world that you were looking at, so leadership development in a big organization, was about actually getting people to work together and understand each other better because Absolutely. Of that. Yeah. Whereas so often you just see it lifted and shifted, especially when there's maybe an outside contractor brought in to deliver it. The goal is to get you to understand what colour you are and then pretty much play act for a couple of days to reinforce that. So then you go back and you're able to tell everybody, I'm this is how you now need to talk to me. But you made a conscious decision not to do that. Why was that? What was your thoughts on it?
Well, first things first, when it comes to learning experiences of that nature, the psychometrics or, self-audit, self-assessment style activity of that nature always gets a group going, gets the juices flowing. They love, I don't know what it is, but learners love the psychobabble stuff. I can't explain it, but I think what I often saw was a disconnect between behavior and the understanding of what the theory presents. And I took the view that these ideas are being introduced in the workplace. They are being introduced in order to have an impact on workplace dynamics, conversational interactions, team strengths, and team audits, of talent audits. They're being brought in to impact ultimately performance and the morale and quality of engagement that's taking place in the workplace. So it's great that I've helped you realize something about, you get all the conversation. Oh, that's really interesting because my husband or wife says, and like, I'm glad that I've opened up your eyes to that. But let's get back to the topic at hand. At the beginning of this session today, you said you were having trouble with a member of your team. You're going to have to give them a bollocking, and you've been feeling a bit funny about doing that. So what has this now just revealed about that circumstance? And it was about helping people understand diversity. Yeah, it was diversity of preferences, diversity of points of view, diversity of histories, backgrounds, and appreciating what impact that could have on the way that we interact and communicate every day. And really, the main learning point that I was using a lot of that stuff for was to say, well, who's in service of who in this conversation? Are you delivering this information that is vitally important for this person to understand in order for them to perform to expected standards, which they want to do, by the way? It's very rare that people don't actually want to perform to expected standards. Are you doing it in your style, to your preference, getting across what you want to get across the way that you would understand it? Or are you recognizing that you are a leader of a diverse range of individuals, all with different views of the world and influences and needs, wants, and desires, and catering and tailoring what you're doing to suit their style?
And getting out of yourself for a second to kind of go, hang on, it might not be that this person is reacting in this way because they don't like me. It might not be that they're reacting in this way because they completely disagree with what I'm saying. It might just be that that's the way they react to something that's new, or to change, or to this style of conversation in this type of setting, or whatever it might be.
Absolutely.
And beginning to understand that. And I kind of do that now, that I bring it down to the actual skills. So this isn't about red, green, yellow, blue, or, other things are out there like DISC and MBTI or whatever you want to use. it's actually about those sort of core behaviors that sit underneath all of that theory, and figuring out when you need to dial those up and down and what they mean and what difference that makes. And when I do it, I tend, by design, I tend to get people at the end of the sessions going, so I'm confused, which colour am I then? And I go, perfect. Exactly that. Because, you know, you as a person that came to your course, as a leader that came to your course, that was, I very much played into that blue space. That was me. Very detail orientated, wanted to know, asked so many questions. I think you said to me once, you did the typical blue thing there. What was that? It says, you obviously had the questions you wanted to ask, but what you did is you waited till the break and you came and accosted me while I was making a brew and asked them more in private. And I went, guilty, Your Honour.
Yeah.
Rather than being more sort of elaborate in that sense. But then I did a similar sort of activity with my team, which I think, you know, this is the crucial thing that I think a lot of leaders, I was going to say do wrong, but maybe don't feel like they've got the permission to do it, or aren't willing enough to let themselves out and be vulnerable enough to do it, is I shared what I was learning with the team.
Yeah.
I did some things that we'd done in the training with the team so that they could come on that journey with me. And we did the old guessing game, and they all said, oh, 100% Rob, you're yellow. Oh, every single member said, I'm yellow.
Yeah.
And it's at that point, even more so, that reinforced the fact, well, hang on a minute, I've not made a conscious decision here to be yellow or to move away from blue. What I've done is I've reacted to the circumstances and people and environment around me, and I'm using the skills and behaviors I think get the best out of people and that they need from me at that time. And if that means I'm very yellow in that job, doesn't really matter. But I now know that I can be all of these things, and I am all of these things, and I'm working on my ability to do all of these things.
Yeah. Well, one of the greatest inspirations in my life, and Philip said to me, that you have to remember that the kind of Jungian heart of all this stuff argues that we all have the capacity within us to be all things.
Yeah.
We are a possibility to live into. It's like four taps in front of us, and it's just which one you're letting the water flow from. And some taps you don't like using, and some taps you do like using, because you are an individual too as a leader. But your responsibility is to those you're leading. And so you've got to turn on the tap that they respond to, that's going to help them absorb information, that's going to help them be successful. And so the questions and the development opportunities are then to say, well, how do I, if I am an analytical individual who isn't very comfortable in conversational situations like meetings and teams, so I rely on spreadsheets and emails to get information across, which may or may not be labeled as blue, whatever. I'm not going to get a slander case from like
all the blues,
or from organizations who make their money from the psychometrics. But it's then about, well, okay, what is it within me? Do I need to think about how? Is it a case of turning down the volume, or to keep my tap running analogy? Do I turn the tap off a little bit, or to at least kill the flow of the blue and turn up the flow of the yellow? I can't go full yellow though; it's just not kind of in my comfort zone. But can I do it enough that it's going to have a positive impact on the people that I lead?
And based on what we've been working on, who do I know that does that more comfortably, naturally, that I can learn from, spend some time with them, see how they do it, and maybe some things will kind of rub off, or maybe we can complement each other. I can call those things in. And I think, we said earlier on, this is about what your intent behind all of this is. So those companies that will be knocking on your door saying you need lawsuits, they're kind of going, if you know that's what you want, if this is about you understanding yourself to the nth degree and really wanting to dig really deep down into your individual psychometrics, if it's like that, psychology, then go for it. Because the end point is going to be that you are going to want to go on a journey of understanding yourself even more and more and more.
Yeah.
Really study yourself. If it's that this is about bringing people together and understanding each other and communicating and collaborating, then that's not the way, in my experience, that does that most effectively. It doesn't seem to be.
No, I'm much more of a fan of kind of behavioural frameworks or behavioural competence that is easy to understand. I think it has to be comprehensive. I've just worked on a project in this space actually recently where, and I always take it back to there was this time when my children were young, and we went to a parents' evening or whatever, and the teacher said, "Right, I've got the whatever it was, the key stage 1."
Yeah.
Learning outcomes framework, and I was looking it over, and because I am my job and I'm a complete job's worth, I was looking for things to criticize, but I was looking at it, and it was really like the behavioral descriptions that these educators were provided in terms of what is considered evidence for behavior in one particular area or another were really great. They were really great. Like there was stuff in there about developing vocabulary, and they had great descriptions around what type of language, how they would use that language, in what scenarios they would use that language, that would demonstrate to that teacher that the education of that individual was developing vocabulary in the expected government standard.
Yeah.
Equally, social interaction. These are the things to observe in the playground that will tell you that this child is or isn't socially interacting to the expected standard. Now, whether I agree with the expected standard or not is a different. Let's not get into that. But I thought this is brilliant. And when you see sort of visions and competency frameworks, perhaps they don't go to that level of detail. But I'm much more of a fan of that than psychometrics, because it's real. It tells people in very real ways, and the projects I've just worked on, I've tried to do that, where it's been a case of like, when you are in a meeting, almost to that level of detail in a way, do people respond to you like this or like this? You're like, well, they respond to me like that. Well, that's telling you something.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think there's a responsibility comes in, because bringing it into the kind of leadership again, you just kind of woke the memories that they had a parents' evening last week, and I'm going to say he or she in a minute by accident, so you'll be able to figure out whether it's Ryan's or Lawrence. But I'm going to try not to.
Roger that.
I've got chief editing rights on this, so
just get it in post. Yeah,
exactly. And the kind of thing was that they were saying that when looking through text, that they would present an argument and then go, "There you go, I've given you my argument as to why I think that's right." And what we need them to do is go a bit further into that now. So go on the assumption that one isn't enough, really hammer it home, that I think this is the case because of this and this and this. The opposite could be argued because of that, but I believe this. Really hammer it home. Right, okay, we can give that feedback. We can work on that. And he said, I'm quite sure if they wanted the remote control at home, or they wanted to sit in a certain place on the sofa, they wouldn't just give you one reason. No. They'd give you 15 reasons as to why they should have that. And I went, yeah. And Gina's kind of next to me and going, yeah. Oh, that makes perfect sense. I think this is the curse of the L&D parent, is that I'm thinking about it from a learning and leadership perspective, and I'm going, yeah, I get that. But the difference is that they've made a conscious decision that the outcome of having that remote control is in their interest. And they know the benefit of having that, and they want it. They're excited about it. They're energized about it. What are you doing as a leader to get them that excited and energized about that book?
I'm sure the teacher loves you, Rob.
That's when Gina gives me the elbow.
Yeah, shut up.
But but again, I kind of go, and by the way, I'm not blaming the teachers for this, because I think it's probably on that side of, we're back to government expectations, we're back to targets, what we need to get through. There isn't the time to do all that sort of stuff. We need them to do this themselves. The same pressures and the same traps that the leaders we've been talking about prior fall into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but what I do appreciate about that is the specificity, if that's a word. How specific that is, that right, they've reached this point where they're demonstrating this behavior, and so now to take it to the next level, we need to see them demonstrate this behavior. That is because that's real in the workplace, and we know what impacts performance or doesn't impact performance around behavior. Psychometrics can give us insight into why we prefer to behave one way or another. But what they don't help us define is what that behavior should specifically look like, which takes us full circle back round to the beginning of throw out the bamboo canes, throw out the hula hoops, and just ask people, right, what are you facing? What's challenging you right now? What did you do? What would you have preferred to do? and connect it to, so what are you going to do tomorrow instead? Into this line of inquiry, just asking those questions.
Yeah.
So you could, you do the psychometrics, but it's not about people walking away and filling out a happy sheet going, oh, it was really revelatory to me.
Yeah.
Which it may well be. Please don't misinterpret me.
I think it can be. I think it again depends on your goals. I mean, the one that was revelatory to me was more the strengths test, I think, than I did the strengths finder stuff. But I think again that, I mean, what I've tended to notice is that maybe with insights and the like, but more so with strengths, is that quite often the results that come up are very much influenced by the job and the work that you're doing.
Yes.
As opposed to your actual
natural,
and your natural personality. And I've got this bugbear with the word natural when it comes to this sort of stuff, because I guess, and again, this is a personal opinion, that people will say to me, yeah, but there is still a natural one. One of these colours will be natural to you. And I go, no, I think that's preferable in certain circumstances, not natural, because I kind of go that for me, leading the team when they thought I was yellow was very natural. Me being very blue when I came to your leadership courses was very natural.
Yeah.
So hang on a minute, which one's natural now if I've got to pick one? Neither of them.
Because you have the capacity to be all of them.
Yeah, exactly.
I often describe it like, through life. I know you've heard me say this before. We're all walking around with like this massive telescope in front of our face, and as life goes on, things happen that start to insert these lenses into this telescope out the front of our face. I may be hijacking another thing that somebody out there be going, I said that once.
So many things that you've now used in your life, you don't know whether you came up with them or who did.
Exactly, yeah. But you're walking around, you've got this massive telescope, your parents, your teachers, that inspirational teacher, the bully at school, the best friend at school, the university experience, all the jobs, all the bosses, all the colleagues, even down to your favorite tune and the movie and TV, all of it is forever just slotting in these lenses, and the telescope's getting longer and longer. As life goes on, all information that you take on board gets filtered right through every one of those lenses before it gets to the natural you.
Yeah.
And where was I going with this? What were you talking about?
I know you talked about lenses and telescopes for a long time. I don't know about you were going, you can dial up whichever one you want, turn the taps on.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So then it just becomes about kind of honest appraisal of self, to say, well, I think the reason I'm interpreting this situation this way, or I'm behaving in this situation this way, is because of that lens there, or that lens there, or this influence on my life that has made me have this outlook.
Yeah.
But it's not appropriate right now.
Yeah.
I need to turn on this tap over here, or maybe at least have some appreciation of the lenses that are in their telescope.
Yep.
And how they're processing all this data and information that's going into
100%.
And that then, so any leader, I mean, it's not an easy job to do.
No.
Because what I'm advocating for is saying that a manager, there's something about being authentic. We advocate authenticity, and then I'm saying, yeah, but don't be you when you're dealing with that person. Which obviously, sensibly, everyone knows that's not really what I'm saying. But it's hard to then learn how to, because you've had all these influences in your life. There's an inspirational leader that inspired you, and you think I'm going to replicate that individual's behaviors and way of being, and I really love the way they led me, so I'm going to try and lead that way. But you're not them.
Yeah.
So your preferences and your energies can't, you may be trying to replicate something that you don't have the capacity to replicate.
Yeah,
so
and it could be your triggers. It could be something like that I can't be as patient with that. I'll end up and say I learned more about the way I wanted to lead from the leaders that I didn't like, that I thought were poor in areas and what they did wrong, more so than the leaders that I had that I thought actually did a brilliant job.
Well, there's something in that. I mean, I've had a colourful career of mistakes that the differences that I've retained and sponged up the learning from it all as often as possible.
Yeah.
And I still make mistakes now, but there's definitely something in that who you are and what you're all about, you can get in your own good way by not stopping for a minute and going, this is a diverse unit of individuals that I'm working with here. I need to show more appreciation for how they receive information, how I can set them up for success.
So in terms of like, you're obviously working again in leadership development right now, and obviously all our time together at Sky was predominantly leadership development.
Yeah.
All the stuff we've talked about, we've touched on all these things that are getting in the way of it, and why it doesn't then embed, or where it doesn't actually get the traction it should do from senior leadership teams, or that maybe the trainers are taking it in the wrong way, or we're measuring the wrong things. If you to kind of boil it down and say, what does the future now then of leadership development? What do L&D teams or HR or senior leadership teams or together, what do they need to change? What's the first step to actually start doing this in a slightly different way to improve the quality of leadership in an organization?
I could have done with some prep for that question, Rob.
All right, down.
Well, for a start, pay everyone better. And pay their taxes. I mean, oops. I think, yeah. So L&D has to, if you want classroom training, I actually advocate for it. I say have classroom changing, but change the paradigm of that.
Yeah.
Change the tone of it. Think about how you're approaching it, and consider what it is you're trying to actually impact, and do one thing well.
Yeah.
You know? And restructure the way that you deliver that.
Yeah.
What then you have to do, and I know this has been spoken about a bazillion times, I'm just definitely throwing my voice in the echo chamber here, is that you then have to change the nature of the relationship with the operation, so that you can ask questions, push back, and help them understand the need for that paradigm change.
Yeah.
You then, I mean, I'm a radical. I think you've got to stop measuring L&D.
Mm-hmm.
I know some people will just like literally collapse with coronary there, but you just got to stop measuring it. You got to you're trying to measure something. You select the right people to support these individuals in the right way, but you don't know when that influence, when that learning is going to just spurt out of them.
Yeah.
So you have to place someone in that impartial, supportive place, and just stop measuring what they're doing and trust them.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that's crucial about that, because I, in my experience, my story kind of always comes back to the restructures and the redundancy cycles that L&D always part of. And in every single one of those, that whether it's led something good or bad from me, senior leadership teams have had loads of stats and loads of figures and data that have told them the great stuff that L&D are doing, but none of that has ever been good enough for them to go, we can't lose them.
Yeah.
What I would prefer is a senior leadership team that goes, whoa, hang on a minute. I know we've got no kind of like impact data on there, but I know for a fact that the work that they do is helping my guys get those figures.
Yeah.
I know that. So we can't afford to lose them. I can't give you the direct stat. And as we say, I mean, I've always thought I've used it quite a time or two with the Sky examples again, that quite often, how many things play into a single stat? How can we say that the course we delivered was responsible for that 10% increase in customer satisfaction or employee satisfaction?
You really can't.
What else was going on at the time? But all too often, and I think, you know, was when we've been working on those things, we wouldn't try to claim that. But in the same way, if it dropped 10% on the back of a training intervention, all too often it's, well, there you go, the training was rubbish, that's to blame.
Yes. Yeah. I was chuckling to myself. Do you listen to Mark Maron, WTF podcast at all?
No.
Totally random tangent here. Cut it out if you want. But he has this weird obsession with Saturday Night Live, SNL. Yeah. And what's his name? The guy behind SNL. And every time he has a guest on who's been involved in SNL, he goes down this little rabbit hole. And L&D redundancy is starting to become your Mark Maron SNL.
Yeah.
Like that's your preoccupation, your recurring theme, as well as Mark Maron's cats.
It is. I'm really, well, from a personal point of view, I'm really sort of, well, it got me. It always got me to come back to the point, why do I bother doing this?
Yeah, because then you're just a commodity, you're just another human resource that, you know, it doesn't matter how passionately you've engaged with both the organization's goals and development of people within those organizations' goals or not. When it comes to the crunch, you just become, it's just bringing down the salary bill.
Yeah. And I, you know, I prefer now to kind of go, you know, think about in terms of your own legacy, in terms of leadership and L&D. I mean, I'll say this for you because you probably won't say it about yourself, but I have no doubt whatsoever there are still leaders at Sky who work and do things that were influenced by the work that they did with you. I genuinely do, because, well, I can.
I hope so.
I still do things that were influenced by our talks and coaching. Oh, shucks. I also forget about a lot of the stuff you taught me because I thought it was. But, no, but well, I really do believe
can't all be winners, Rob. That's an interesting point. So right, you are entitled to take or leave any of them because they're all just ideas.
Exactly that. But I genuinely think that that's what we have to start thinking about now. Too many L&D and leadership development professionals forget the reason they got into that in the first place. Yeah. And they become part of that machine that just churns out whatever it might be and recycles and redundancies and all that sort of stuff. That role is no longer there, but your legacy is.
I hope so. I do hope so, genuinely.
I genuinely believe it's also at Talk that I went afterwards and you didn't even work there. Your legacy, is there. But that, that aside, I just think that's now what I try and focus on, is that, there is no smoke without fire, and I'm not looking for fault anymore. I'm not saying it's this person's fault, that person's fault, or the other fault, but there is a fact that L&D are not valued in organisations when the proverbial hits the fan, when cost needs cutting. Now, whether that's L&D's fault, and in some organisations it will be, whether that's senior leadership fault, and in some organisations it will be, in some it'll be neither, and some it'll be both.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, if they provide something that is clearly and obviously valuable to what the business is doing, and based on the future vision, that is going to continue to be clearly valuable, then you would not restructure and redundant those people.
No.
You absolutely would not. Because for me, it always comes round. So, you get rid of a leadership development department, within the next 5 years, you're probably going to have a leadership development department. It kind of comes around full circle.
Yeah. It's the investment and the support of senior leadership in an authentic, genuine way is hugely important to make these types of ideas that I've talked about a success.
Yeah.
And what I'm passionate about within that space. Like I say, just give me the freedom to teach my two things.
Yeah.
I'll teach them like a boss.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And that's what you did well again. You didn't just speak. You've mentioned that your bread and butter is first line leadership. That's what you really enjoy. But you did speak to the heads of and the head of departments and the senior leaders that were all around the centres and beyond in all the different centres. You were on first name terms with them. You talked to them over a coffee, whatever it might be. And I think so many training teams don't do that. We say we've got the seat at the table. That person sat at it. It's their job to talk with those and trying to influence them. I honestly think it's everyone in L&D's job to break down those barriers and talk about it, because who is this person from L&D to come over here and tell my leaders how to lead? I don't even know who they are. What's their background?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you'll win some, you'll lose some, You'll win some, you'll lose some. They'll want to order off the menu, and you'll say, I don't think ordering off the menu is the right idea for you today. And you'll go back and forth. And maybe the hierarchy in the organization you're in will mean that eventually where they say, no, I'm having that off the menu, please. And you're going to have to do it. And, you'll win some, you'll lose some. And you have to accept that. But then I think, I suppose if there's anything to take away, what I was particularly passionate about, that moment of realization was that, well, if I am going to have to deliver a starter, a main, and a pudding off a menu, because that's what the operation is demanding, and that's what the dynamic between L&D and the operation is demanding, then in my space of that, I'm going to shift the paradigm of it. I'm just going to change the tone of it. I'm just going to integrate newer ideas into the sandpit that I've been allowed to play in.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that absolutely came across. Absolutely did. On that note, we've got to the part of the podcast where I think we need to look back at what we've been talking about and decide on what a title would be. I'm quite liking the idea of something to do with the menu that you keep bringing up, by the way.
The menu, ordered off the menu.
I don't necessarily want the word paradigm in the title.
I don't know. Yeah, I've said that a lot. I'm not even sure I'm using it correctly. Does it mean what I think it means?
I think it does.
Let me know in the comments below, folks. And while you're down there, hit subscribe and thumbs up for Rob.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I know what you mean by paradigm, so we'll go on the basis that that's what it means.
Yeah, that's fine. Hopefully everyone else will. Yeah, let me know if I'm using it correctly. I'm going to Google it when this finishes and panic and be like, oh, I've misused
Rob, can you
word.
edit the entire episode?
I've wildly misused the word because it doesn't mean what I think it means.
Dub me every time I say the word paradigm. Now Rob's voice is going to get dubbed over you saying something completely different.
Yeah.
Think about it differently.
Something about the menu. I don't know. Yeah, go for it, man. If that's what you want, I'm easy.
That should we put that as the title?
You could definitely like put something in the title about how much of an enormously positive influence I've been on your life and how you owe your whole career to me. Maybe that's what it should be. Rob owes his whole career to Chris.
I don't like to mislead my audience. I have integrity.
You just said it before. I thought that's what I was supposed to do. Pick a title on something that was said during the episode.
There we go. On which note? No, I think something along the lines of the L&D menu or change the menu or
I mean, there's definitely I don't my whole thing. I suppose the whole thing is about that. If there's a lot of talk, a lot of big talk about. We can't be order takers. We have to change the dynamic, change the relationship with the operation. But the fact is, a lot of people are in organizational structures where that is a very, very, very challenging thing to do. And there's a long journey in order to do that. Should it be that long? What's the impact of it being that long? Those are all, up for debate. But so just one small step at a time, just incrementally shift it, just change these smaller but significant elements of how that goes out there. And if people are going to have to order off the menu, then I don't know, just spice up the meal a bit. There you go. There it is.
There you go. Spice up the meal. We've got it. There we go.
Well, I did kind of orchestrate that to...
as you do everything. So no, that's brilliant, mate. And I enjoy these conversations with you, but I was really keen to get your voice on there because I know you, by your own words, say that you quite often prefer to be behind the scenes.
Yeah, I like, I consider myself, this is going to sound really egotistical, and it is, but I consider myself the kingmaker, not the king.
The kingmaker. Spice it up with the kingmaker. I think we've just got. I'll change it again. But mate, I really do.
Throw what you want on there, dude. I'm easy with that. I mean, I know it's like the whole thing with leadership untitled. I know I'm totally messing with your formula.
No, this is playing right into it.
I am trolling you. You realise that though, don't you? You know what's going on here,
as you have done for the last 10 years. So, on that note, mate, if people for some reason wish to follow you. Or see more of what the mighty kingmaker has to say on things, what's the best way they can either get in touch with you or see what you're doing, or is it? I know you're not a big social media person, so this could be a difficult
not really
one. Is it PO box number instead?
So if you could deliver by carrier pigeon or Hogwarts owl to the no, I mean, I do check in on LinkedIn. I'm more of a lurker. I'm a lurker rather than
that doesn't sound right at all.
Active participant. Mate, that's what all the kids say, innit? About, chat rooms and
lurker. Right, okay.
I'm a lurker, yeah.
The lurking kingmaker.
Yeah, I lurk. I get in there. I have a little flick through, see what people are talking about. I like to keep my eye out for new. So if you message me on there or you send me an invite, it will get accepted. I've got a long turnaround on it, but it will get accepted. Yeah. Otherwise, I am pretty. Yeah, I keep my head down, and just focused on my guys. Just focus on my guys.
Perfect. Well, there you go. I'll put your LinkedIn profile link on the bottom of these comments so people can get to you and do that.
Or get in touch with Robin. He'll just pass the message along.
Yeah, I'll just say what he said.
Yeah.
Brilliant stuff. Really appreciate that, Matt. Have a great day, mate, and we'll speak soon.
Pleasure as always.
Cheers, mate. Bye-bye now. So that brings us to the end of this episode of the Leadership Untitled podcast. This episode will be called Spice Up the Meal. All that remains is again to thank Chris for joining me today and sharing all his experience and insights with us, and also for you, the listener, for listening. If you like what you heard today and you'd like to hear more, then please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on an episode. And if you'd like to know more from myself, then please get in touch at robmoores.com or rob@robmoores.com. See you soon. Bye now.